Hey y'all, so looks like we've got a live video going. A couple of questions. Here are the questions I'm looking at today. What's up with Iran? Number two, can we afford a war with Iran? And number three, what are our true priorities? So what's going on there? Feel free to share your comments. So, for one thing, what's going on? Why is this an issue? How does this become an issue? Who is it in our culture and in our society that is making this an issue in our world? Is war with Iran something that is in the best interest of the United States? Is Iran a threat to us? If Iran is a threat to us, how is it a threat to us? How does that work? So somebody just joined me, Donald Adams. So I'm welcoming comments as far as a few questions. One, what's up with Iran? Why all of a sudden is there a lot of talk about Iran? What are some of the reasons why there's so much talk about Iran? Who is making this an issue? Who is making this a big deal? So I do the climate report, and I've done 172 episodes. Write a comment if you want me to link you to that. It's theclimatereport.net. But in that 172 episodes done mostly over about 6 months, I've come to the conclusion that we have 5 threats, that the human species has 5 threats to our existence, none of which include Iran or Russia or China or North Korea. I mean, if those countries are a threat to us, it's so remote, it's so trivial compared with the other things that we should be dealing with. So that leads me to the question, why is there so much talk about Iran? Where does that come from? To what extent is it a media-created thing? To what extent is it something that our president and his advisors want to make an issue out of, but is not really an issue for the average American? To what extent does the average American, could the average American benefit from going to war with Iran? Is Iran a threat to us? How is Iran a threat to us? Or is this a contrived thing? Is this a made-up threat? Because here's one thing that has happened over history, and that is the United States, the powers that be in the United States, just like any empire, the powers that be in the United States are eager to create threats where there are none, because there's a lot of money to be made in war. The people who sell arms the people who sell arms make money from war. And also multinational corporations make money from war. So take companies like McDonald's, like Home Depot, like Taco Bell. These companies make money from opening up markets. They make money by the unequal relationship that the United States has with other countries, because the United States doesn't deal with other countries as an equal. The United States bullies the other countries into trade deals. So, for example, NAFTA. Although, is NAFTA an agreement between the American people and the Mexican people? Or is NAFTA an agreement between a few oligarchs in the U.S. and a few oligarchs in Mexico? Some of the wealthiest people in America have benefited from NAFTA, but that doesn't mean the American people have benefited from NAFTA. Some of the wealthiest people in Mexico have benefited from NAFTA, but that doesn't mean the Mexican people have benefited from NAFTA. So back to the original question, what's up with Iran? Why is there so much news? What's going on in the news? I mean, there was this drone that was shot down over Iran. And is that drone so do we go to war over the Iranian military shooting down a drone? What is our drone doing in their airspace? What is a drone doing anywhere near our airspace, near their airspace? You know, what would be the outcome if Iran had submarines off of our coast or warships off of our coast? What would be the deal if Iran had military bases on the coast of California? And not on the coast, yes, off the coast of California, but the border with Canada. What if Iran had military bases along the border of Canada? What if Iran had military bases lined up all around the Mexican border? Would we consider that a threat to us? Are we treating Iran with the same respect that we want to be treated? Or is that even a relevant question? So are we willing to treat Iran the way we would like to be treated? Or is it an unequal relationship in which we are the strong ones, so we get to call the shots? Well, if we get to call the shots because we are strong militarily, then that's not the rule of law, that's the rule of force. That's the law of the jungle. When the strongest can dominate the weakest, or when the strongest can dominate anybody who is weaker, then that's not the rule of law. That's the law of the jungle. Do we want the law of the jungle? Do we want the rule of force, or do we want the rule of law? So, hey Don, if you're still watching, why don't you, do you have any questions or comments with respect to Iran? Okay, so let's go back in time a little bit, and let's talk about a little bit of the history behind relations between the U.S. and Iran. So, does the name Mohammad Mossadegh mean anything to you? How many Americans would recognize the name of Mohammad Mossadegh? So this is something that we should be taught in school. This is something that we should be taught in third grade. We should know the name of Mohammad Mossadegh every bit as well as we know the name of George Washington, Abraham Lincoln. Because we know George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. We're taught these patriarchs over and over and over again because they reinforce a pro-establishment narrative. But Mohammad Mossadegh was the Prime Minister of Iran in 1953. So, Iran is oil rich. So as of 1953, the Americans and the British had already discovered that Iran has a lot of oil. And there was an oil company by the name of Aramco, which later became BP and was the state-owned petroleum company, state-owned oil company of the United Kingdom. And then it was later sold, and it's now a private company. But Aramco was an oil company that had a strong presence in Iran, and the Brits took most or all of the profits from that, and they paid Iranians next to nothing, like 50 cents, 75 cents a day, to extract the oil. Meanwhile, all the profits are going to the British government and to the shareholders of Aramco. So, was that fair? Was that right? Well, Iranians had the radical idea of maybe the resources of our country should be primarily for the benefit of the people of our country. So there's a question: should the resources of a country be primarily for the benefit of the people of that country, or should the resources of the country be primarily for the benefit of the shareholders of powerful corporations that have the rights, that have the drilling rights, etc.? So the Iranian people and the popularly elected government of Iran, as of the early 1950s, believed that Iranians should be the primary beneficiaries of the natural resources of Iran. And they elected a government, and Mohammad Mossadegh was the prime minister. And Mossadegh said, we're going to nationalize our oil fields. We're going to say that the oil fields are hereby the property of the people of Iran and the government of Iran. So, how does the average American react to that? How does the average American react when a government, a country, nationalizes its resources? They say, oh, that's communism, that's confiscation of property. They don't have the right to steal our property. But the thing is, these oil rights are often acquired through shady deals, backroom deals with cronies, and sometimes they're acquired through warfare. And arguably, the people of a country should have the right to nationalize resources. So, and sometimes that means land reform. Sometimes that means taking land and redistributing it to the people of a country. So, let's use a familiar example for land reform. And let's say it's the 1860s, and the South has lost the Civil War, and somebody has the idea that the plantations are going to be broken up and redistributed to people. Let's say, for the sake of discussion, that we're going to pay fair value. The government's going to pay fair value for the plantations, but then after paying fair value, it's going to be redistributed to former slaves and to poor whites who never got a chance to share in the profits or the wealth of the cotton trade. So the cotton wealth was acquired in two ways. One, you have to dispossess the Native Americans, and two, you enslave people, and that's how the wealth was acquired. So the people who own all this wealth the people who own all this wealth, did they earn it? Arguably, the people who have all the wealth that came from cotton didn't earn it. They acquired it through conquest, and they acquired it through enslavement. So it's not wealth that's earned. So shouldn't the government have the right to buy the plantations at their fair market value and then redistribute that to former slaves and to poor white people? There was a promise that was made, 40 acres and a mule, during Reconstruction, former slaves were promised 40 acres and a mule. And wouldn't that have been fair? So there are times to redistribute wealth out of acknowledgement that the wealth was acquired through the wealth is a result of ill-gotten gain. It was required through theft, required through oppression, required through conquest, required through murder and genocide. And so there's a time to redistribute wealth. And therefore there's a time to nationalize natural resources, especially when for decades and even centuries the people of Iran have been given a raw deal prior to the 1950s. You could say the same thing about other countries. For decades and centuries, the people of Venezuela have been given a raw deal by the imperial powers. The Spanish, the British, the Americans have taken the natural resources and not paid fair value for it. So there's a time to nationalize. But anyway, that was leading up to the main point, which is my Facebook. Okay, that led to a time. Okay, we're talking about Iran. We're talking about what's up with Iran. Can we afford a war with Iran, and what are our true priorities? So a little bit of history is helpful. In the 1950s, Iran had a popularly elected government. So the U.S. is supposed to be all about freedom and democracy, freedom and democracy, freedom and democracy. And our elected leaders lie to us by saying that they're supporting freedom and democracy all around the world. But then there are times when we are absolutely at war with democracy. I mean, let's look around the third world. The third world includes all but, 20 or 30 countries, 20 or 30 of the wealthiest countries in, Japan, China, Russia, Europe. These are, there are a handful of countries that are industrialized and wealthy, and most of the rest of the world is poor. So, lost my train of thought there. I had a good thought. So, what's up with Iran? Can we afford a war with Iran, and what are our true priorities? So, let me just share with you where I'm coming from. A war with Iran is something that we can't afford. Financially, it's immoral. What right do we have to go tell Iran how to run its business? If we want democracy to thrive in the world, then the thing to do is to leave other countries alone. How can democracy thrive anywhere when we're always meddling in the affairs of other countries? So, irrespective of what we've been told, the U.S. is an empire. The U.S. is an empire that will steal, kill, and destroy in order to get what it wants. And the American people, for the most part, are not the primary beneficiaries of that empire. We benefit some from inexpensive goods, cheap bananas, for example. So we benefit financially. As consumers, there are some benefits financially from the empire. But as workers, our economy suffers because of the empire. Because things like NAFTA, it's a whole other conversation. But if you think that middle class and poor Americans benefit from the U.S. being the top dog of a worldwide empire, then my question to you is, how does that work? How do Americans benefit from the empire? Michael Parenti says the republic pays for the empire. The republic pays for the empire. In other words, the people of the United States pay for the empire. The people of the United States pay $1 trillion a year. In conservative terms, it's probably closer to $1.5 trillion a year. But in conservative terms, we pay $1 trillion a year for the U.S. to maintain an empire. So taxpayers pay for the empire. Meanwhile, the people that benefit most are the very wealthiest people, the shareholders of the Fortune 500 companies, the shareholders of the publicly traded companies that benefit from the U.S. having an empire that's based on theft and conquest and bullying and intimidation. So that's how I feel about it. Talk to you later.